my title, and I'm a lecturer in economics and employability director at the UAE School of Economics. If you heard my colleague Fabio speaking in the previous panel, and I'm going to be the chair of this session. And I'm very warm welcome from me and also from all the panelists. And now we see the teaching conference banner, and this session I'm very excited about because it's going to be about artificial intelligence. The title is Brave New World, AI and Education. This is hitting every discipline, I would say, and certainly economics. So I'm very interested about what the panelists, but also you, are going to tell us in this 1 hour and a half. Just let me tell you that this session is now going to be recorded and will be uploaded on YouTube as well. I would like not to monopolize at all this discussion. For this reason, I would like to reiterate the invitation you may have received if you followed the previous session of posting your questions in the chat, and we are going to pick them up. You can even vote them, and then we will make sure that your curiosities and suggestions will be taken on board in this conversation. You may be seeing me moving around because I may be taking notes and checking your questions, but this is pretty normal. So now I'm going to introduce very quickly the three panelists in a rigorously alphabetical order. I'm sorry for Victoria about that. And first we have Giancarlo Ianulardo from the Business School of the University of Exeter. And then we are going to move on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, where we have both James Tierney and Victoria Vernon from the State University of New York. James, actually, you come from Tierney Education, so from yourself. You are an educator, I would say a little bit more later on. So each of them is going to speak for 15 minutes. And then after all the presentation, I'm going to open the floor for your questions. We are going to keep the videos on, and I hope that you're going to enjoy. So let me start with Dr. Giancarlo Ianulardo, which is a senior lecturer in economics at the economics department of the University of Exeter in the business school. He is a great expertise in philosophy and ethics of economics, has also interest in environmental economics and maybe some of you as well, circular economy, certainly me. The title of his presentation, and he's going to screen share very soon his slides, is Sparking Students' Curiosity as an Antidote to Academic Cheating and Plagiarism in the Era of Artificial Intelligence. So long title, and I have my curiosity whether you would be able to tell me something about assessment integrity in this context. But the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes, Giancarlo.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Andrea, for the presentation. This is my name is Giancarlo, as Andrea said, and this is a joint work, joint work together with a colleague from the University of Perugia. And I'm not going to talk about ChatGPT per se, but since I'm also working as the senior academic content officer in my school, I'm very much interested in the relationship between this artificial intelligence and new techniques, and what is going to be the impact of this on academic integrity or the lack of it, and so all the challenges that we are facing. I'm looking at it from my perspective as someone who has been teaching philosophy of economics and who has been working on it, so with an interest on the philosophical aspect of education and of economics in particular. Now, this presentation will be structured in some parts. At the beginning, I will just speak about very briefly on the challenges and threats that ChatGPT is already given to the providing to the academic environment, what to pay attention to when marking exam papers, and then a recent debate that has taken place in economics education between the different views of what critical thinking is. In particular, debate that took place in the Journal of Economics Education. I will provide a small example, and then I will conclude with some remarks. What is my take on the problem of the relation between this artificial intelligence and economics education, in particular the notion of critical thinking, and why we should not be worried about this, even though this does pose a problem, but we can positively integrate this in our teaching. Just to start with, to make a little bit of context, basically, and looking only at the academic papers that have been published in the last few months, since there's been all this explosion of interest on ChatGPT. So I'm not looking at interesting things that have been said in the press, but just at academic papers. There have been some articles from Cohen and Tabarrok and Geerling and others who have shown how to integrate in a positive way ChatGPT for the study of economics. But on the other hand, there has been also a little bit of concern by others, and there is a list of authors that are mentioned in the final bibliography by Cotton, Usen, etc., who have put who have stressed, I mean, the risk, especially with regard to plagiarism, fabrication, misrepresentation, contract cheating, all the usual problems that are certainly not new. They were already existing, but now they are becoming more and more of a problem, precisely because some of the traditional detection tools that we use, as for example, Tierney, has become ineffective. Now, independently of whether the trend in the academia is going to be to ban this or not, or to go back to the full online, the full on-campus exam, the problem of academic integrity and the problem that are due to artificial intelligence is something that we will have to cope with anyway, because, for example, we will still need some individual essays. We will need have to ask students to do some dissertations, either at the undergraduate level or the master level. So, independent of what is going to be the trend in the academia, this is something that we have to look at. And the problem, according to some, can be dealt with by using some Turnitin for artificial intelligence. There are some, for example, some of the tools like ChatGPT 0 who have tried to detect the use of it. But at the moment, most universities, as far as I know, for example, my university, at the moment, they do not accept these tools because they are not compliant with some data protection aspect. And so basically, you cannot use this as a proof or not even as a way to try and detect it. And so you have to rely on something else. So you cannot use these tools as of today. I don't know what is going to happen in the future, but this is something that, independently of the technologies, is something that has to do also with some legal aspects. And I'm not going to talk about this, but I just say that this is something that at the moment we cannot use in most universities to detect it. So as someone who has been dealing with this program as a senior academic conduct officer, I have tried to look at some aspects. For example, some of these papers that I've been, dissertations or also in essays that I've been looking at, have some problems with, for example, the reference list, using, for example, some fake references. Also, they use some repeated definitions. They make frequent changes between the tenses, past, present, and future in short distance. They use also quite a lot some sentences as the above findings shows that, but the above findings are inexistent. So, and there are other aspects, also false claims, other aspects that I've been looking at, and I just made a temporary and a tentative also list of possible aspects that show the possible use of AI. But all of this, in the end, except probably for the first one, when there are some clear fake reference, all of this in the end are they are a very specific aspect that concern not just the use of artificial intelligence, but is something that may happen also with some poor or mediocre students. So it's very difficult in some cases to distinguish where this is the outcome of a poor preparation by students, or students who do not have a good control of the language, or is the outcome of artificial intelligence. So just by looking at what are the current trends in the literature, and also in the practice of the policy of the universities, there are basically three proposals. Some would like to ban it altogether. Others would like to permit it, but only if students can make reference to it. And there is a third proposal that actually is encouraging the use of it, because they think that it is very good for the preparation of economics, and look at economics, but also in other subjects. And I mentioned at the beginning, for example, Cohen and Tabarrok and others, important economists who are showing how to use it positively. So these are the three current trends that belong to the current debate. But I would like to take this from a different perspective. This is the specific aspect on which I'm working on. That is, looking at a recent debate by some authors that has been started with a paper by Colander and Siegfried in the Journal of Economics Education, in which they have stressed the importance of critical thinking. And critical thinking is the key, according to them. And I think this is the point we should start with when, as lecturer, we are preparing the questions for students, and also in terms of what we expect from students. And the definition that they provide of critical thinking is that they say critical thinkers are curious, they do not accept claims at face value, they ask many how and why questions, they possess the virtues of intellectual integrity, humility, civility, and a sense of justice. And they distinguish between little think, which are the tools and models that we teach as economists, and this represents, in some sense, the inside the box thinking. And on the other hand, the big think, which is grounding of the methodology of philosophy, of humanities, rather than just on the teaching of the methods. So in this case, this is a little bit like thinking outside the box. When they make this distinction, they are not saying that little think is despicable, or we should not use it, or we should forget about it in the teaching economics. Actually, they say this is actually the starting point is very important, but we should not limit ourselves to it, and we should try and go one step beyond, because this is the characteristic of the human contribution. And what they say is that in order to think critically, one must have this attitude to the critical inquiry that is open-minded, honest, and we should be open to accept conclusions if they are derived from unbiased evidence. So in other words, what they say is that the aim should be to achieve an objective, didactic, and evidence-based education. Now, what we say instead is that we agree on the issue of the critical thinking, but what we say is that objectivity is not something that can be the starting point, but is an ideal of the research. And we develop this on a more philosophical grounds. If we want something that is not inside the box, we should abandon the deductive approach, and we should instead try to use a more inductive way, but in the Aristotelian sense, not in the Pagonian sense of adding experience over experience. And also even rely on evidence should be qualified better, because evidence per se depends on the methods of inquiry, which belong to the little thing. So all of this is well known to the philosophy of science literature, etc. And so what we claim is that if we want to challenge this little thing and going one step beyond, we should develop a more inquisitive and reflection. What I did, for example, in this particular context is an example by using myself ChatGPT. Now, just to make a little bit of context, one of the topics that I teach in my module of philosophy of economics, and one of the questions that I used to ask students, was about one topic, which is the McCloskey's theory of the great enrichment. I will not be talking about it now, but I just say that what she says, what McCloskey says, and what I teach students is that she stresses the importance of ideal values that have explained this great enrichment that occurred in the last 2 centuries, since 1830, 1840, more or less, basically in the third decade of the 19th century. And so there are all of these ideal aspects that, according to her, are very important, including rhetoric, including the dialogue and the exchange that made it possible, this great enrichment, as opposed to the material causes. Now, what I try to do, and this is an experiment that I did with ChatGPT, instead of asking the typical question, which is explain the features of the great enrichment, or what made the great enrichment according to McCloskey, I asked something different. That is, why the great enrichment did not materialize in the 18th century. In other words, I try to challenge to think outside the box, the ChatGPT tool. And what I got as a reply, I have also printed it, and so maybe later on I can show it if there are questions about it. But just to summarize it, what I got from ChatGPT is very interesting, because ChatGPT basically focused on timing and context, institutional factors, technological limitations, global context, and colonialism, which are all completely wrong answers. That is, in other words, ChatGPT failed completely in answering the question, because it basically made some claims that go exactly contrary to the explanation of McCloskey. And so a student who would have followed this would have made it all completely wrong. So all of this basically missed the main point of McCloskey, which would be making reference to rhetoric, liberty, ideals of dignity and equality among men and women. So all of these are the key points in McCloskey, and all of this were not grasped by ChatGPT. When I try to challenge it further with some further prompts, basically asking about the literature, can you provide some literature? I got some fake literature. And when I asked more and more questions, for example, and what about rhetoric? What about liberty? What about the ideals of dignity? Basically, what ChatGPT said was just that I had to look at some further sources and scholarly perspectives that will help me develop a more comprehensive understanding of the topic. So the interesting point is that if we start this exchange, then at some point ChatGPT will enter a dialogue with the student and will direct the student towards some further research on it. But entering this dialogue already presupposes that you know something about it and you start challenging it. So I will now I just want to go to the conclusion. To the conclusion of this. I think that, and that's my main point, we can, and actually we should use it, or we can use it, let's say, we can use it, but not because, at least in my view, this is something that would help the student. It may be that someone can find how to help the student, but because this will show the student the key difference between human intelligence what Greeks call the nous, that is intuition, the going beyond, the ability to grasp the limits of our knowledge, and so trying to think outside the box, and the intelligence instead, or what people call the artificial intelligence, which probably is artificial non-intelligence, and that is very much limited to what is already available and is manipulated in a probabilistic way. And students must be prepared to do this, because they will have to tackle these challenges in the future. They will have to compete with artificial intelligence, and it's very good that they know what the limits of artificial intelligence are and what they can do instead. Okay, and so that's all. Thank you very much, Andrea.
Thanks a lot, Giancarlo, for your very fascinating presentation. I will have already thousands of questions, but let us now move to James. So let me introduce James Tierney. Yours is a fascinating story, because you moved across different universities, and then you decided to, and I could list them, there are many, and then you decided to create your own educational consulting business. So you are purely an educator, say, and you are still teaching at universities, Susquehanna University, as an adjunct professor of entrepreneurship, which rings me some bells, given that I am an employability director for my school. So let me introduce your presentation, using ChatGPT to enhance education, practical strategies for reducing administrative burden. That's very welcome, given the admin and the burden that there is behind our academic growth. So I'm very eager to get some tips from you. The floor is yours.
Hello. This is a title that was written by ChatGPT for the proposal back in March. So hi, everybody. My name is James Tierney with, I guess, officially Tierney Education. A very creative naming process went into that. So I'm so glad to be here. It's great to see many of you in the chat and in the participant list that I haven't seen in a while. I'm back to this room where for a year and a half I taught 1,000 students via Zoom for Penn State University, Intro to Macroeconomics. My 2 dogs are in here, but if they start barking, I have the spray bottle, so that way they don't interrupt this presentation. So yeah, ChatGPT to enhance education, these strategies for reducing administrative burden. So a few quick things about me. This is my link tree if you want to follow up with anything. I know we have a short time today. So on there is Instagram, Twitter, which I don't use as much anymore for reasons. But there's Instagram and email and everything. Please send me questions. I love talking about all of this type of stuff. As was mentioned, I've kind of hopped around a little bit over the past few years. Most recently, my full-time position was at Penn State University here in State College, Pennsylvania, where I still reside. I was teaching large lecture intro and intermediate macroeconomics. I also was doing a lot of online development. And then through the pandemic, I really started to discuss with my wife of where I really wanted to see my career going. And it was much more one-on-one work and working with faculty and doing more entrepreneurship things. So I ended up leaving Penn State, starting my own entity to be self-employed. I also, my other half of my life is owning an improv comedy theater in State College. So entrepreneurship means a lot to me in that sense as well. As was mentioned, I'm currently at Susquehanna University as an adjunct. And in fact, I did go back to Penn State's Business School as an adjunct for entrepreneurship in the spring, which is where I really figured, like, man, if ChatGPT and these AI tools are coming, we should be figuring out how to eliminate a lot of this administrative burden. And I knew there would be presentations on cheating, which is super important. I knew there would be presentations on how can we, leverage AI and ChatGPT to do assignments, which is super important. And that's why I'm like, let's talk about ways that it can help us as faculty members. So that's what we're going to talk about. So first things first, let's go over the agenda. I'm going to get your input a little bit. We are going to say, why is this focusing on ChatGPT and not all the other cool things like integrations with Zapier, or, should we be using Midjourney to make our slides well, or this Canva right here, this presentation, the core of it was Canva's AI. And then of course I just entered all of my stuff in it. But why are we focusing on ChatGPT? I then want to just go this last semester, what worked for me and what didn't work, and then propose some questions about what is the future for us as mainly teaching faculty, but also research faculty. You know, this is a teach e-conference, but for research faculty as well. So some of you actually already filled this out, but if you were interested in, this is a 5-question survey that's asking what your pain is when it comes to administrative burden. I posted this yesterday on LinkedIn and on Facebook and in a couple of groups that I'm with some of you in, and already got a good amount of responses. Things that I read about were responding to emails with students was one of the administrative pains, creating syllabi from scratch if it's a brand new semester or going to a new school. And I'm just really interested in learning about what other faculty members are feeling as their biggest time sucks. I think that's the word I actually use in the survey. I say, what are some time sucks for you? So if you have a QR reader on your cell phone, go ahead and go with that. I was going to do a tiny URL, but if you're like, I don't want to use a QR code, but I still like to fill out the survey, you can just email me, just james@tierneyeducation.com. And I'll send that back over to you. And once we are in the final Q&A session, I'll make sure I go through some of them and say, oh, this is some of the things that we got. So first things first, why am I going to only talk about ChatGPT? Well, I have 12 to 13 minutes, and there are so many tools out there. And so I figured I would focus on the ways that I used ChatGPT this last semester. It's easy to use, right? So the technology behind, right, the GPT and these large language models, you know, they've been around for a few years and they've worked, you know, pretty much the same way they're working now. With a real revolutionary thing that brought it to the forefront was the user experience and making it easy as just a chatbot. And so it's very easy to use. And my guess is you are all here, so you have at least played with this a little bit. Budget friendly, so you can have your free version, or if you want to make sure you get priority in use and have access to the higher model, then $20 US a month. And it's also well known, right? So I know that coming into a presentation like this, we can have a really good discussion around ChatGPT. So that's why we're using that, because I did get questions leading up to this of other AI tools in education. You know, some that are maybe well known, like Gradescope, but we're not going to really talk about a lot of that stuff. So the meat of this presentation is I want to chat through some things that I legitimately used this last semester to help reduce the amount of time I was spending on what I would consider non-teaching moments, non-teaching hours. For me, if I can save myself 2 hours a week, I would put that into my students in either getting to know them or trying to reach out to students who may be falling behind, people who have missed. Like, that's what I feel like was missing from my superstar educator, right? For other people, it might be if I could save 2 hours in creating my learning objectives this week, I would put it towards research, or I would put it towards spending time with my kids, or I would put it towards traveling to Vegas, whatever your moment of choice is. But as economists, we all know about opportunity costs. So what are some things that you can use ChatGPT for? Maybe you've thought of some of these, maybe you haven't. I would love to demo some of these at some point. I do actually have a couple of videos on my YouTube that I made this semester of just going through some of this stuff. I should put more up because my digital marketing guy tells me I need to keep updating YouTube, but again, opportunity costs. So the first thing, which I already said, is creating learning objectives. So I taught for the first time last semester, I was teaching social entrepreneurship and innovation, which I really, really enjoy. And I've read a few books on it, but I've never taught it before. And I was sitting there with a blank page and was like, okay, what should I be teaching? And I had the textbook. And I'm like, well, why do I ask ChatGPT what might be some really good learning objectives? The prompt that I gave for that was, I'm teaching social entrepreneurship and innovation for the first time. Can you please provide me with 8 learning objectives, knowing that I was going to take 5 that I felt were good. And of course, I edited it, right? I'm not going to sit here and say you should just cut and paste everything in from it, but this should give you, it gives over that writer's block if you're writing things like learning objectives, etc. I've started rewriting parts of my syllabus. So I started teaching, let's see, so my most recent writing of the syllabus would have been in 2014 when I started at Penn State. And I've had a welcome statement that's pretty much just been the same ever since. And you cut and paste that right into the prompt and say, hey, this is my welcome statement. Can you rewrite this to sound a little more professional, or to sound less professional, or to sound easygoing? Sound like a pirate if you want. You could write your whole syllabus that sounds like a pirate. Any of that will help just kind of keep the material fresh. I absolutely loved using ChatGPT to construct my emails. I was teaching 2 sections of entrepreneurship, intro entrepreneurship at Penn State with 35 students each in the spring. And then I was teaching 1 class of that social entrepreneurship with 12 students at Susquehanna. And I really like to be organized. I think students like being organized. They know what to expect. And once I wrote 1 email, then going forward, I would cut and paste that email into it and say, I need a week 2 email. Here are the topics we are covering. And then it would just spit it out. And it was very similar, but different enough that the students think that I was writing it. I will say, and something that was mentioned with Giancarlo about citation and like referencing it, at the bottom of every email that I would send, I had a signature that said, I use ChatGPT and Grammarly to help with communication in this class. Learn more about it here, and link to OpenAI. I wanted to do that for my students to realize that it's a good tool that you can use to help with things like this, but also it's very important to cite that. In fact, I included it in my email signature from Outlook. And some people would get back to me and be like, this was written with ChatGPT. I was like, no, all I responded with was okay. Of course, that wasn't written with ChatGPT, but some of them are. You can also create robust assignments and rubrics. This is where I saved the most time this past semester. At Penn State, there is a big event that's called Thon. It's a dance marathon where they raise about $12 million for a local pediatric cancer hospital called the Four Diamonds. And I wanted to do a project that they went out and they talked to 5 people who went to this event. It was a customer discovery project in entrepreneurship. And I'm like, man, I don't have time to come up with all of the parts of it. So I gave ChatGPT a prompt that said, this is what I want to do. I spent maybe 5 minutes feeding it. I want this to be out of 100 points. Here are the key concepts that I want for it. Here's the deadline. Can you please write an announcement that is going to announce that this assignment is now assigned? And boom, it spit it out. So instead of spending an hour trying to figure out how I wanted to write all that, it was 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, right? Again, I'm not saying you should use this to just wipe away everything that you have to do, although that would be wonderful. But if that happened, then we probably wouldn't have jobs. But how can we take this stuff from an hour to 20 minutes? How can we do that is really going to help us out. Also created the rubric, which was awesome. We use Canvas for our learning management system. And so you can put your rubric right into Canvas, how many points. And all I said was, it's out of 100 points and I need 5 categories. Give me the rubric, and it would spit it out. Cut and paste it. And you can actually cut and paste it directly as a table from ChatGPT. So then it went right into Canvas as a table, and it was really easy for grading. When I was teaching social entrepreneurship, I had never taught it before. So I would go into certain topics, and let's say for social entrepreneurship, one of the topics was deciding between being a nonprofit and a for-profit. And so I would just ask ChatGPT, what are some ways that I can kind of relay this information? That's always a good way. How do you do elasticity? I'm tutoring right now. Part of my business is private tutoring, doing a lot more statistics than I thought I would. I've never professionally taught statistics in a classroom. So I've been using it a lot to just say, okay, what are a few ways that you can explain Z-scores like someone was in high school? And it'll kind of put that, I don't like to say dumb down, but I'm going to say dumb down. Dumbs down the material to like someone who's just learning for the first time. What are some really good examples? You can also summarize news articles, which has been super fun to do. Plug in an entire Wall Street Journal article and say, please summarize this in 1 paragraph for me. So that way, when I email students, I say, hey, this is an amazing article. You should read it before next class. Here's a summary to get you started. It'll help them kind of move into it. And you can also summarize student submissions. And if someone's giving you like a 3-page paper and you're like, okay, I want to see what just like the summary of this one is, because maybe you're grading for completion instead of for like every single bit, you can do that with it. All of these things have cut down the amount of time. Now, what has not worked well? Well, ChatGPT is not going to do a good job with grading unless you're like, I did try throwing a couple of papers in and saying, can you give this a grade for me and then give some feedback? And it does okay. But there's GradeScope you can look into. Bill Goff uses this a lot, one of my colleagues at Penn State. You should ask him if you have any questions on it. I'm sure there are some of you in here that have used GradeScope. Multiple choice question writing, you can do it, but if it can write the question, it can definitely answer the question. So I'm still kind of hesitant on using it to write, kind of basic questions, unless of course you're, doing in-person quizzing, then maybe it's not a big a deal. Also, organizing data. I was like, when I started using ChatGPT, I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm gonna take all my students' data and then I'm gonna ask it to organize it for me. But remember, it's a large language model. And the way that it's working is it's just assigning probabilities to what the best next string of text is going to be. And so it will give wrong data. Like I pounded my head against the thing, be like, no, I told you I wanted this. And it's like, oh yeah, that's right. It's not, it's not meant to be that. There are other tools that do this well. You can now integrate a lot of the GPT stuff into Excel and of course, Microsoft with OpenAI. So there will be tools for that. I just would stay away from ChatGPT for this. Okay, in my last minute, what is the future? Maybe student chatbots, right? So then who needs a TA? Okay, that's a possibility. Auto emailers, what if every time a student emailed me something that was on my syllabus, they just automatically got a response back? That would be cool. AI tutoring, like Khan Academy is already doing this. And so because of this, I can see where educators can be a little afraid, be like, hey, where are we needed? And this is something I was talking with my good friend Corey actually yesterday about. In like computer science and programming, everyone is scrambling to how can I use AI and ChatGPT and all these different models to kind of multiply myself? How can I become more efficient? So that way, when the chopping block, when it comes down, I'm the one on the right side that can do a lot more. And so I think we need to do that as well as educators. So if a lot of educators start believing it's a threat, but don't know how to use it to multiply themselves, become more efficient and a better instructor or researcher or whatever, then it's probably going to leave us not working. So I want to continue to have this discussion, maybe in the discussion board afterwards, anything like that. Email me. Again, I love chatting. How can we use ChatGPT and other tools as a multiplier, not as a replacement for us? Because we don't want that, because we love what we do, or else we wouldn't be sitting on Zoom with 80 other people on an afternoon or morning or evening, depending on where you are on the globe, listening to James Tierney talk about ChatGPT. And that's me. Sorry, I went like 30 seconds over, I think, Andrea.
That's fine. Thanks a lot, James, again. And yes, I don't want to be replaced as an educator and as a lecturer. So let us make sure that it's going to work for us too. And now, please let me move to Dr. Victoria Vernon, Associate Professor of Economics at State University of New York. You have a very all-round interest in economics, because I was giving a look to the models you taught. You probably taught everything. And you also have a great expertise in assessment design. And I'm not surprised by the title of your presentation in this sense, because it is adapting economics assignments in the era of ChatGPT. Really curious, because this is really a hot topic right now.
Yes,
Victoria,
I know
the floor
all the
is
answers. Thank you for your introduction. I'm going to share some of the insights on how to discourage the use of ChatGPT in the classroom and how to encourage the use of ChatGPT and AI in the classroom. As we have heard recently, ChatGPT is doing better than most of our students. That's according to a paper by Gehring in terms of its performance on the standardized test of economics. So what can we do about it? Suppose you come to your first class in the fall and you pose a question in a discussion or in an assignment, and the question sounds pretty general. What makes someone a successful entrepreneur? What characteristics are needed? Who have been the most successful entrepreneurs recently, and whether they considered implicit and explicit costs when starting a business. And if you're in a classroom of 100 people, you can expect that most of the answers will be pretty similar. And those would be good answers. They would have a lot of bullet points and numbers and list all the characteristics and mention Bezos and Zuckerberg and Musk. And overall, might earn a B+ or so. So what are you going to do about it? If you suspect that this question this answer is written by AI, well, if you're not sure, you can of course run it by Tierney, Zero GPT, or even go back into ChatGPT, paste a little excerpt from it in quotation mark and ask, did you write that? And in my experience, GPT confesses right away. Yes, I wrote that. Or if the answer is human written by me or by another student, it'll tell me that no, I did not write that. And it's being pretty accurate, actually more accurate in my experiments than AI identifier. So I prefer asking GPT directly. What are the ways, all the ways to stop students from using AI? Look, I've listed all the ways that I can come up with, and there's none. So let's look at let's look at our own creativity. Well, speaking of what Giancarlo mentioned, that there is academic integrity policy that many universities are now developing, and many schools ask individual instructors to offer their own policy in the classroom. You can find online a list curated by Lance Eaton. It's a Google list in real time where economics instructors share what their policies are currently in their class or in their university. My favorite one is from Harvard. That I expect you to use AI in this class. In fact, some assignments will require it. Learning to use AI is an emerging skill, and I provide tutorials on how to do it, but be aware of the limits of ChatGPT. If you provide minimum effort prompts, you will get low quality results. Don't trust anything it says. It gives you a number of facts. Assume it's wrong unless you either know the answer or can check with another source. AI is a tool, but one that can help you, one that you need to acknowledge using. Please include a paragraph at the end of any assignment that uses AI explaining what you used the AI for and what prompts you used to get the results. And failure to do so will violate the academic integrity policy. So I myself will use a very short version of this in my classes because I will end up encouraging the use of AI. Okay, so based on my experimentation with AI, where I asked students to use ChatGPT to answer any of the discussion questions across a couple of discussions, among them was that entrepreneurship question. But along with that question, had other questions for which students did not choose to use AI, or maybe they did try, but it was not successful. And here are examples of questions that I consider GPT proof. Number one, in economics, a rational person is someone who makes their decision purely by comparing costs and benefits of various alternatives to maximize your own utility. Give your own example of a cost-benefit decisions that you made recently. Describe the cost and the benefits, including opportunity cost, and conclude whether you are a rational person. So this aims at a student being able to apply a concept to his or her own experience. That's good. Number two, illustrate an economic concept from this module using an example from current events or your own experience. And where appropriate, share a link to the news article. So this one is also aiming at the application based on current events. So some supply and demand news and price. I give an example usually. Price goes up and there's an explanation in terms of supply and demand. Number 3 question is listen to a specific YouTube presentation by one of our instructor, or this could be by anybody else you want, and describe his main points, what you think of the issues raised. So here on purpose, I did not really elaborate on what the issues are raised, because this way you can you can paste it into GPT and GPT will elaborate more. So here students actually, I see they were watching the video and giving their feedback. Number 4, play one of the games at an economic games website and describe the game and what you learned from it. So here again, you have to do it yourself. Number 5, review current issue of The Economist, which our students do have access to through the library, college library website. And what economic news of the week has attracted your attention, and comment on it. So how does it relate to our course? So another application question. So the GPT-proof strategies, if you put it as a list, would be ask to illustrate a concept with an example from personal experience. And here I'm thinking in terms of the Hammermesh's book, Economics Everywhere, would be a good example, where he asked students as extra credit to submit examples of all sorts of concepts like externalities and price discrimination and on. And in that regard, so a good modification of the entrepreneurship question would be to ask students for their own experience with entrepreneurship and have them actually do some thinking, some critical thinking around it. Okay, other strategies. Tie question to current events, get students to apply the concept, ask students to read a specific article such as The Economist or the New York Times or Wall Street Journal. Ask to reflect on a specific video or a guest speaker in your classroom. Use questions with graphs. That's another big one, because the questions that ChatGPT missed on the standardized tests were graphing questions. So the free version is not able to graph or to understand graphing material. So I'm now using more questions with graph in multiple choice tests. So the free, the ChatGPT 4 does have a plugin called Ask Your PDF, and that one may be a little smarter about graphs, but I don't expect my students to use that version yet. So another big one is to use specific requirements, such as your final paper should have at least 5 references to sources from our university library, and give them specific library links such as JSTOR or The Economist or the Wall Street Journal. So that's it. Then literature also suggests using presentation instead of papers, because now it's hard to evaluate the final product. So you might as well ask students to understand it first and then restate it, and at least you will be able to make sure that they applied some problem solving and critical thinking skills. You can ask them to create video presentations, which does not always work with my adult students, but I can experiment with that too next semester. So some authors suggest using in-person exams and oral exams, which can be logistically difficult in our online school, in our online classes. But overall, there is a recommendation of scaffolding your assignments more and shifting away from evaluating the final product to stages, such as the proposal, the outline, the literature review, and then the final paper. However, a word of caution on that is that GPT generates really good outlines. So for example, I typed in I asked GPT for an outline of a conference presentation on my topic today, and it gave me an abstract that makes sense. It's rather general, so and you could now, once you've talked to GPT for a while, you can recognize certain language it uses. It restates back to you your question, so you'll see that, and then it likes bullet points and it likes numbers, but it also volunteered to give me an outline, and this is something that the students can use as well. So you can also motivate students, or at least try to do their own work by warning them that instructors can tell that they can use GPT. They recognize AI sentence structure and they can use AI detectors. Many answers, you can warn students, are superficial, incomplete, flawed, so it can hallucinate, as we know. And one actually has to know the subject in order to ask AI the right kind of questions. You can remind students that GPT can lie confidently, invent references, create fake text, pictures, videos, and how can you, as an educated person, can tell truth from fiction? You need to gather knowledge, develop critical thinking, develop your intuition. And also my favorite final argument that I heard is that you can appeal to students, morals, and say that your paper is linked to you. It's part of your digital trail that you leave behind. Do you want to be tied to something that you're not proud of forever? So use AI thoughtfully. And here's an example of how I am going to modify my final paper in my advanced level economics classes. For example, in the economics of gender, work, and family course. It used to be a pretty standard 10-page paper asking students to dig deeper into one of the topics discussed in the course. And think of research questions such as what explains male-female earnings differential, or does work from home make us happier? And go through the literature, find at least 3 references to journals published in economics, to papers published in economics journal, for example, on JSTOR, and those need to be recent references, gave them some examples of topics and issues they can explore. But this time I will also ask them to do a search on an AI tool called Elicit, and I'll give you an example in a second, and also present that the results of that in their paper. I will also ask them to do a separate proposal with literature review, and the final paper will be due later. I'll give them feedback on the proposal. I'll ask them to search through The Economist, and I will ask them to search through cutting edge research on IZA. So this is something that I don't expect ChatGPT to be very helpful with, although if you're very, very, very skilled with GPT-4, you'll probably be able to do that as well with the help of AI. But let's hope that they'll do it themselves. So Elicit tool, it's interesting. So it's your research assistant at elicit.org. I give an example of a question here. Does working from home make you more productive or increase your productivity? And it gave me a list of recent papers I also mentioned the word economics in it. So kind of to steer away from sociology and psychology papers that may also be on its radar. So it gave me a list of pretty good valid references, though at least that I consider valid, because this is one of my research topics. Unfortunately, these are not the most recent papers. It doesn't, for example, quote our research that we have done with my co-authors on the topic, but these are the kind of cutting edge papers as well. And it also gives you a little summary in the abstract of what are the findings. So this way you can explore within 10 minutes, you can explore answers to several questions and actually brainstorm the research topic. Other strategies I might use in my other small classes that I teach on a variety of topics, like say international political economy. I'm thinking of asking students to connect their final research paper to start their final research paper, to develop their research question based on a specific article from The Economist or from Project Syndicate or some other current publication, where they would discuss that publication and then they'll go further and explore the topic. So I will also encourage the use of AI as a writing aid. For example, they can ask AI for a strong introductory paragraph on the topic of this and this, ask to give arguments in favor and against, let's say, a certain policy or idea. So this might just include something that might be outside of their radar right now, and they would be able to take a broader view at a topic. Brainstorm ideas, create paper rough outlines. You can ask GPT for sources of data. Again, we know it's not always good, but with very specific question, it actually turns out to give, most of the time, give good answers. So I have a project in my macro and micro classes that for some time I thought was entirely GPT proof until a little while ago. So because it asks students for their own experience to apply economic analysis to their own employer. Many of our students are adults, they already have jobs, they either produce goods or services. And my project asks, as a midterm and a final in the introductory macro and micro courses, to choose the product that your company produces and conduct the economic analysis by answering questions. Describe it in terms of who are the buyers and sellers, inferior good or normal good, does it have complement substitute, whether it's necessity, luxury, comment on the price elasticity of demand, then outline all the factors that might be demand shifters, that might be supply shifters, and then using one of the factors from supply and the demand set to also draw graphs showing how this particular factor changes supply or demand, or price and quantity. And what I have seen is that I ran it through GPT, and I've seen that answers to the questions on supply and demand factor list was incomplete. So GPT would earn about a C+, and on some questions about B- B in this particular project. And it gave a pretty good instructions on how to draw graphs, but did not draw graphs. So yeah, some answers you will notice will be incomplete. This project continues in, for example, the micro class with other questions, where you ask what are some of the important inputs in productions, and to describe the fixed costs and the variable costs. to describe the firm's industry, and whether the industry is perfectly competitive, monopolistically competitive, oligopoly, or monopoly, to prove your point. And actually GPT was pretty good with this kind of answer. Then some of the
Fantastic,
barriers.
Victoria. So
Yeah,
if you
so
can say the
some of the
last thing,
final-
then
Okay.
we move to
Yes, question and answer. So if you want more on how economists use ChatGPT, I want to refer you to Cowan and Tabrock's working paper on their website. They give really good advice. So my summary is, education was disrupted before several times by searchable internet, by MOOCs, but we're still alive. AI is a useful tool for students and for teachers, and it will make us stronger before it destroys us. If you want to learn more about generative AI, there are various sources, including Google mini courses about that on that topic. Thank you very much.
So thanks a lot, Victoria, for your detailed presentation. And I saw the chat moving quite a lot of messages, a lot of questions. Please do remember that there is the networking mixer right after this session, so in 27 minutes. But let me just start reading some of the questions. So first of all, let's refer to all the panelists. So for Giancarlo, James, and Victoria, a very quick question. Do your universities or the university where you work have an AI policy when it comes to students' work?
Yes, in my case, in the University of Exeter, we have a policy that has been just updated, literally, it was in March, and this is already updated. So for plagiarism, for fabrication, for contract cheating, for some of the specific items that concern the academic offenses, and this already applies to students. So students have been informed about it. And also there are some specific indications in case students want to use it, that they have to declare it. And so it is clearly stated that they have made use of it in some specific cases, just like when you cite a work. So we do have a policy updated just 2 months ago.
Okay, very, very detailed, I would say. And that's the same also for James and Victoria, or it's different?
Oh, in my school, we are allowed to use our own policy in every class as instructors. But I can imagine schools, we are very new to this, and schools are only developing their policies. So many schools are just a little bit behind with that. I'm actually glad that we're allowed as instructors to have our own view on this issue.
Thank you. And James?
I'm not sure. I'd have to see what Susquehanna is currently doing for their policy. I'm sure it's something, but
I can say in my case, there is nothing yet, and I was checking this last week. Now, a question that actually comes from me, and then it would be just from the speakers. Wearing my employability hat, I think, shouldn't we teach our students how to extract value from ChatGPT? Because one day they are going probably to work. In one of the presentations has been mentioned, okay, they will be even competing with artificial intelligence. I can tell you that a friend of mine has a PhD in finance, he works in risk management, and he codes also by using ChatGPT. So what's your opinion? And perhaps we can start from James this time.
Yeah, I'll say as early as February, maybe even before that, I had heard students telling me in interviews they were getting asked, how are you going to leverage AI and ChatGPT in your everyday work, right? So I had a couple of students like, oh, I'm so glad that we learned about this stuff in your class because I've been asked about it in my job interviews. So absolutely, we should be, someone should be, it might not be us in the sense, like if I'm teaching intro to microeconomics, is it my job to introduce students to everything that they are going to need? Do I need to go over resumes with them, right? So do I need to go over AI? But I do think our jobs as educators will need to 100% show them how to leverage it.
And Victoria?
Yeah, absolutely. You can ask ChatGPT to elaborate on like 125 uses of ChatGPT, and it'll give you 125 different uses of ChatGPT for various jobs. Or you can ask it for uses in a specific industry and a specific job, and it will also give you examples.
And Giancarlo?
Yes, thanks, Andrea. Yes, actually, this was the main point of my presentation. That is, I'm very much in favor of teaching with it, but not because it can help in economics or in any other discipline, but because it can teach what is the difference between the creative thinking that human intelligence can provide and the reproductive thinking of artificial intelligence. However, the point is that this, maybe at least, this is something that is challenging not just for students, but for us lecturers as well, because in order to do this, we have to be able to provide or to ask questions. So if we want to elicit an answer that goes beyond, we have to provide questions that allow students to provide an answer that go beyond the boxes. So we should not do some mechanical teaching as well. Otherwise, I mean, the point is that not just students in the future that will be replaced by artificial intelligence, but also we lecturers, we are at the risk of being replaced just by chatbots that reply to questions if we are not able to do this. So it's challenging for us and for students, but I mean, it's something that we have to be able to do. I mean, if we want to have students that are able to cope with it in the future.
And actually, your answer links pretty well to a question that is referred just to you, Giancarlo, which mentions that artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, is going to improve over time, to change. And then how do your approach to interacting with ChatGPT depends on what it can do now, and remember, is going to change over time?
Yes, that's why, I mean, in my case, I did, when I presented the example, it's not just that I was trying to think of something that was ChatGPT proof. I mean, Victoria talked about this, and in my case, it's complementary to this in the sense that it's neither overlapping nor opposite to what she said. It's just a different approach that I try to do. That is, I know very well that ChatGPT is improving continuously. So even maybe the literature that now they produce some fake literature, maybe in the future this will not be the case. So in my case, the point is just to think at what an artificial intelligence cannot do. And basically what it cannot do is just thinking outside the box. And which, I mean, is what in the literature is known as the metic thinking, that is the cunning of reason, the capacity of reason to go beyond itself, to grasping the limits. So this is the reason why it's not an automatic question. The question that I presented maybe in 1 year or with a new version will be easily answered by ChatGPT. But the point is trying to think what ChatGPT cannot do. And basically, if it's something that has not been available in the literature, is something that cannot be reproduced by ChatGPT. So it's going beyond the mechanical way of asking questions. So it's overcoming it. It's not reproducing a mechanical question. And so you will get not a mechanical answer from it.
There is also a very brief question related to the example that he used, where there was the did not formulation, and whether a counterfactual would help to confound the ChatGPT tool.
Yes, I mean, at least in this case it did. And I also tried repeatedly with other questions. And I mean, I didn't get, I mean, I got the similar poor or wrong question from ChatGPT. Of course, you need to make sure that there has been no one else or not, there is not a big discussion on what had happened in the previous century, or as I did in my question. But counterfactual questions means something that precisely has not been developed in the literature. So you are trying to ask the students to use the same concept that they have studied, but applying to something else, and which has not been investigated directly. And so it's something that can help in trying to overcome and also trying to go beyond what the ChatGPT can do. So it can help. Of course, if, for example, in the case of my questions, there have been many studies on this particular topic in the previous century, then maybe someone else or the ChatGPT would have been able to answer it. But it's something that, in some sense, is one way to go beyond the ChatGPT. But again, the question that we make, I'm not providing a sort of mechanical teaching, because if I were to say, do all with this question, this would become something mechanical, what I'm saying, and this will be, again, something that maybe in the future will be done better by a machine. So we as well, we have always to think on something different. But counterfactual is certainly something that I think would help, just like some example presented by Victoria or others have. For example, ChatGPT is not able to think on itself. The reflective thinking is something that is missing. The consciousness, basically, is not self-conscious, ChatGPT.
Thanks a lot. Now, going back to all the panelists now, there is a common trend about data protection. And in Europe, we have GDPR, then there is FIPA in Canada, and there are many other regulations depending on the jurisdiction where you're based into. All these student submissions, students' data, even with personal information or anonymous teaching evaluations, everything we may think about that we want to exploit ChatGPT and artificial intelligence to help us in investigating in the outcomes. Well, is this going to be breaking any regulation or not? Do you have any idea? Perhaps your institutions have already instructed you about that. If there is anything you can share with the audience, that would be more than welcome.
As far as I know, ChatGPT is not saving information beyond the current chat. So you're safe with your data, trusting it to GPT. I might be wrong. James, what do you think?
Definitely not my expertise. So I wouldn't want to say anything incorrect other than my personal feeling at this point would be I would ask for forgiveness versus, because if I were to ask my university, they would tell me I can't do anything. So I would, but that's just me personally. But everyone has their own risk tolerance.
Giancarlo, you have any point on that?
Well, on data protection, what I know is that at the moment, the issue, as I mentioned, is on the tools to detect it, so we cannot use it. Then in terms of the responsibility, so someone who is using it, of course, since it is not allowed, so of course you cannot use it. I know that many journals now do not allow the use of, as a co-author of this artificial intelligence, precisely because of data protection and the responsibility. But this concerns journals and reviews, not the university. But the issue of data protection concerns at the moment the university in terms of the detection tools that cannot be used at the moment as they are.
Thanks a lot. And then there is a very tricky question. There is a website in which you can rate your lecturer. That becomes public domain, and then ChatGPT would be able to use it. At this point, is this going to be fulfilling any regulations in data protection? Probably the answer is no. So I think that things are going to become very public domain. Do you have any concern about that? because this will affect also what the students are going to write, of course. We can start with Victoria, perhaps.
I liked Stacy's comment in the chat. She said, well, if you can ask ChatGPT whether you wrote it or not before, that it must be storing some information. I actually think it may have another algorithm to figure out whether it wrote it or not before. Maybe like certain words have a sequence in a particular order where like the probability of the next word is like 99% every time. And with a human, it's less than that. So I believe that this may be the answer, and it never really memorized what it wrote before. But what if it did? What if it does memorize? And then there will be some data issues in the future, and we cannot even tell right now what the implications might be. We're too early in the development of AI. It's only been less than 9 months, right, of public use.
And James, any opinion about that? Any concern?
So something that Victoria said about, like, you know, how is it getting those next strings? I have a really good resource on like an introduction to everything that I got back at the Core Econ Stanford conference that I was at. So I'm going to defer my time to Giancarlo while I go and find that so I can post it in the chat.
Well, no, actually, this is not something I'm an expert on, so I don't know in particular, but certainly I do agree that this may pose an issue, may pose a problem. The issue is that this is a field that has not yet been regulated, so we don't know yet what is going to happen in this case. We just know that the journals now are not accepting this precisely because of this problem, but the availability of this and the possibility of ChatGPT of manipulating it, and also taking into account that ChatGPT manipulates according to a probabilistic nature, so this can also alter, can also change things, just like it altered the literature reviews with an author that is a true author, and then the name of the artist is completely invented. So this is something that can be applied also to rate my professor or etc. So it's not even something that is reliable, apart from the issues that you mentioned, Andrea. So it's something that of course is creating lots of problems. Even because of this reason of the manipulation and the incorrect manipulation of it.
And then we got, and that's a question for all of you actually, we got a key question in my opinion about inclusivity. Is this going to, these large language models or ChatGPT, other AI, is going to affect in a heterogeneous ways different groups of students? So for example, the very top students or the weakest students or other types of diversity we may want to consider is going to really have an heterogeneous impact on them, in your opinion, if you have any anecdotal evidence, or better, anything that is not anecdotal. That would be key to share with us. You can start, Giancarlo, perhaps.
Okay, yes, I mean, in terms of differences, I would say, as far as I've seen in the many examples that I came across, rarely I've seen a very good piece of work, even when the question was quite standard and obvious. So even without looking at the particular type of counterfactual questions or something related to the ChatGPT proof question that Victoria talked about. So even without looking at this, I got some poor questions. There are other examples that in more typical standard economic questions, there was a good performance by the artificial intelligence. But in the case of the essays, I didn't see it. Maybe it can be helpful for some students who have some language barriers, so this can help frame it, but still it requires a knowledge of the subject to then use the particular language framed by the artificial intelligence tool. So at the moment, I don't see this, but maybe in the future, this can become more and more a problem, so, or a solution of the problem.
And James, what do you think about that?
I was posting the 2 resources in the chat, so I missed the initial, and I'm not going to try to answer and pretend I heard it, so I'm just going to ask you to repeat it.
Okay, then let us move to Victoria. And
Okay,
perhaps
even better.
That's fine.
repeat.
I work with students, many of whom are first generation college students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. I believe if we teach them how to use AI to improve their writing, to improve their paper structure, it will empower them. It will open up new opportunities for them. And it's up to us to teach them and guide them through this process. Okay.
If I can
I
give
can
my
answer.
opinion as well.
can
Oh,
answer
yes,
it.
please go ahead.
No, it's okay. I remember what that question was. Thank you, Victoria. I think there's 2 things I want to add to it. The first one, which I believe the initial question in the chat was like, what types of students are using this? And I did find that, you know, students who are more connected with friends who might already know this and maybe are already trying to, you know, circumvent all the rules in the class, like learned about ChatGPT early. So that's why I do think it's important that we as instructors can tell everybody. One of my biggest pet peeves are when like only half the class knows it's open book. And so now you're like punishing the half that's like, oh, I didn't realize it was open notes or whatever for like online classes. So having that, you know, if all my students are using this, then like we should all be using this. And to kind of also piggyback on, you know, first generation students, like learning things, a lot of students have anxieties and issues of asking questions, especially in a classroom of 700. Asking these questions that are dumb questions like, oh, I really should understand what elasticity is. Letting students know, like, you can go to ChatGPT or whatever bot we end up using, asking it the questions you're uncomfortable asking me because you don't want me to think you're stupid, and get a good response from that, I think is a really good tool. And I think that's really going to democratize education more than it already has.
If I can add, yes, I have a positive feeling about that. I think that the outcome is not really much predictable and could be surprisingly positive, and we just need to train them, and especially for students that could have cultural or language barriers, this could be really a game changer, at least at the beginning, and then there will be up upon that. Final question, yes or no from each of you, and then we are going to move to the mixer. Do you think that moving back to in-person exams would be the response, the unique response for assessment integrity? We can start with Giancarlo.
Yes, okay, thanks. Yes, I think that, thanks for the question. This is something that I mentioned also in my session. That is, certainly moving to in-person may solve in part, not just the problem of ChatGPT, but because this was also a problem before. I mean, you could also have contract cheating, someone sitting with you and solving the exam with you. So it's in general a problem of plagiarism or contract cheating or misrepresentation. So some of these problems that are typical of academic offense, they were already present, and they would be present also with even more, maybe with ChatGPT and other forms more advanced of academic of artificial intelligence. But the point is that independently of whether you decide to move or not to all in-campus exams, you still have to think of something that would be outside the box, in the sense that would be or ChatGPT proof or would enhance the student creativity, because I mean you still will have, for example, individual essays, and individual essay test some specific skills that are not tested on campus. You still have dissertations for undergraduate students you still have a dissertation for master students, so you have some specific kind of assessments that cannot be replicated on campus in as a 2 hours or 1 hour and a half of exam in campus, which is very important, but they test something different. So we still need to be prepared as teachers to this.
That I think is a very good point. I wonder whether very quickly, James and Victoria, you agree with the no of Giancarlo, or you are for yes, let's go back to in-class exams?
I'm a yes when it's needed. And I think it's so dependent on what our objectives are for the classroom and for the learning, right? My entrepreneurship class, I'm not going to have in-person exams. I'm going to make them come up with presentations, and I'm going to let them use AI to do it because that's what they're going to need. But if I'm teaching intro to macro and I know that my intermediate macro colleagues are going to need them to really understand some stuff, then yeah, in-person frequent exams and research-backed pedagogy tips and tricks is what I would teach them.
Thank you. And Victoria?
To me, this question sounds like in online education where I'm in, are we going back to proctoring exams and using proctoring software? Because we're not bringing people into campus, but online, can we proctor it? And that also ties into the question, would I buy stock in proctoring software right now? I guess maybe yes, there will be schools overall. I will not personally be doing it and suggesting it as a good strategy to anyone, but I can see that there will be a move towards nudging the online education into like more proctoring to make sure students are doing their own work. So yeah, I would not recommend it, but I do see it happening.
Thanks a lot. Now I need to apologize with Moses because I have to close this session. It was brilliant. I think that we will then be able to speak for another hour, but I do invite you, Moses, to join the mixer to intervene, and invite all the panelists as well to join, and all the audience. Let me thank for all of you, the panelists, but also the attendees, for the fantastic interaction we had. I look forward to meeting you in a couple of minutes. Take care.